What's up, my D&D family? Today I've got another build for you. Now, when Mystic Odyssey of Theros first came out, we got two different Paladin subclasses, one of them being the Oath of Glory. Now, the community at large said that the Oath of Glory was garbage, and I kind of just took the community's word for it, but as I've looked deeper into it many months later, I actually think the Oath of Glory offers a lot of cool power that we can explore with this build. So let's jump into it. When it comes to your lineage, sky's the limit. Choose whatever you feel like you want to play. As for our stats, it's going to be standard Paladin stats. We have Strength, Charisma, and Constitution. The Oath of Glory Paladin and the Mystic Odyssey of Theros at large is all around Greek. It's around the Greek myths, it's around the Greek culture, and so I wanted to take something Greek and put it into this build. Hoplites are a perfect example of this. Hoplites historically used a shield and spear, so that's what I'm going to want to be putting onto this character. And as it turns out, if you take a shield and spear with the Polearm master feat, as well as the dueling fighting style, you come out with a pretty strong package. So let's break it down for a second. Your attack is doing a d6, but when you hit because of the dueling fighting style, it adds 2. This mathematically means you're essentially attacking with a d10 weapon. Then as a bonus action, you get to attack with the pommel, which is normally a d4, but once you add that 2, is essentially a d8. So 2 d10s and a d8 every single turn, while getting to keep the +2 AC from having a shield, on top of every time someone moves next to you, you get an opportunity attack, getting essentially another d10 weapon attack. Our damage output is fantastic for a really small, compact package. On top of that, the way Paladins work is the more attacks we get, the better. The reason for this is the more attacks you get, the more likely you are to roll a crit. The more likely you are to roll a crit, the more likely you are to drop a massive smite. So the more attacks equals better. Now, so far, everything I've talked about has been something any Paladin can pull off. It's a fantastic package for Paladins. But let's get into what the Oath of Glory Paladin can bring us that no other Paladin can. First off is just a quick mention that we get Guiding Bolt. Paladins notoriously do not have good ranged options, and we won't be using it often, but when the situation comes up, it's going to be fantastic to have in our back pocket when we need something for 120 foot range. The next thing is that our Channel Divinity gives us advantage on grapple checks, so we are more of a specialized grappler than any other Paladin. And with our setup, all we have to do is use our free item interaction to stow our spear, then we can grapple somebody. Now, when it comes to grappling, you need to be able to have some sort of follow-up. Sure, you can just grapple somebody, but that's not going to give you as much value. And the most direct way to get more advantage from grappling is to increase your movement speed, because that means that you can move somebody a long distance, potentially taking them out of position, potentially putting them in hazardous terrain. And that's where our fine steeds come in. We can grapple someone and then drag them a long distance. More than most people can drag somebody while grappling them, so we can take people way out of position, so we have some synergy there. Speaking of our horse combined with our Channel Divinity, which allows us to jump, we have great mobility moving along the ground and some pretty decent vertical movement just by having big jumps. It's underestimated how big these jumps can get. And this is mostly focused on high jumps. Long jumps, the extra 10 feet, not a big deal, but for a high jump, it is. Now, how high jumps work is it's going to be 3 plus your strength modifier in feet as far as your upward jump goes if you get a 10-foot running start. So we're adding 10 feet to that, so we're basically going from 8 feet to 18 feet. And then interestingly enough, it also has your height times 1.5 feet added to that. So the taller you are, the higher you can jump. Kind of interesting. So let's say we're 6 feet, that's going to add an additional 9 feet. So now we can jump around 30 feet high. Pretty wild. And if you consider that we're on a horse, which is probably going to be around 5 feet high, we can start getting some pretty crazy numbers as far as our jumps go. But options to jump on top of buildings to have high ground, options to jump on top of buildings to break a window to enter, or an option to jump towards where their archers are posted up. These opportunities begin to present themselves once you realize just how high this character can jump. So something to consider. Now, I talked about having increased mobility, and our level 7 aura gives us even more increased mobility. It gives us 10 feet, and anyone we start our turn next to also gets an additional 10 feet of movement. That includes our horse every turn. So we have this dueling fighting style set up. Once we get on a horse, we can switch over to a lance. Now, the lance benefits from the dueling fighting style, so instead of being a D12, it's essentially a D16 weapon, so it hits like a truck. Now, it's not going to do as much damage because we don't get that bonus action attack, but it does give us reach. So now we can move with our horse, who starts out with 60-foot movement speed, but we give it an additional 10. So now it's 70-foot movement speed, and we can take the dash action because it doesn't have to take the disengage action because we have reach, more often than not, which means we have plenty of speed to get in there, hit who we need to hit, and then go post up by an ally who might need additional movement speed next turn. So we can be passing around this 10-foot movement speed bonus to our teammates as we see fit. Our second Channel Divinity allows us to give temporary HP to teammates once we hit a smite, so it increases our tankiness in general. and it's a good option for when we don't need superior mobility or grapples. We also come with Enhance Ability, which gives us a lot of out-of-combat utility. Not only can we be a face, we can also represent helping teammates out in their roles, whether it be a rogue, infiltrating, or whatever it may be. It also takes us from being a decent face to being a great face. So we have a solid core, but what's the peak of an Oath of Glory Paladin? How strong can we get? Well, once we get Find Greater Steed at 15th level, things start to get really crazy. So Find Greater Steed is going to give us a Pegasus. Pegasus has 90 feet of movement naturally. We're going to add 10 feet to that, making it 100 feet. We also come with Haste, and when we cast Haste on ourselves, it also gets cast on our Pegasus. So here's where things start getting really crazy. So now our Pegasus movement speed is doubled, so now it's 200 feet. And then we also get a dash, as well as a second action to dash again. So we can get up to 600 feet of movement speed per round. On top of that, we are expert grapplers. So we can now stow our weapon, use our channel divinity to be able to have advantage on our grapples and have 600 feet of movement speed. This can open up some pretty crazy combos. So let's say that you're grappling someone medium and your DM says that it's not going to half your horse's movement speed. Let's start there. So let's say we started next to somebody. We can grapple them with advantage. We can then fly 200 feet up in the air, which is the maximum fall damage, drop them. If you didn't know, falling happens instantly as written. They're gonna fall 200 feet, take 20d6 of damage. Well, that was only 200 feet of movement, so we can fly back 200 feet of movement, pick them up again, and we still have 200 feet of movement to fly them back up and then drop them again. So we can do 40d6 of damage with essentially 2 at advantage attacks. Now, is a DM going to allow this? I doubt it. They're probably going to half your movement speed or give them some sort of reaction on the way down, something to work with. But even in that case, we still have 600 feet of movement to go attack someone, get an advantage attack. If we hit, great. If we don't, we just do our second attack, grab them, lift them up 200 feet, drop them. And if we had an extra attack, we can just do some sort of unarmed strike at the top, and then we can drop them anyways. So even at the worst, like even a DM not being lenient, you're still going to get 20d6 of damage just for getting one grapple off. So if your DM's lenient, 40d6. If your DM's not so lenient, 20d6. Interestingly enough, other paladins can't do the same thing. They can grapple and fly up and drop them, sure, but they're not going to have advantage. And it turns out that extra 10 feet of movement is actually some pretty interesting breakpoints for that strategy. They can never do the 40d6 because we essentially have an extra 40 feet of movement once you add in all the dashes. So the Oath of Glory Paladin kind of comes in clutch in those small little breakpoint areas. Pretty interesting. And you might be saying this is gimmicky, and fair enough. If you don't want to do any of this grapple dropping people thing, you can still put on a lance, fly up to them, attack because you get that extra attack, and fly away to protection, maybe positioning yourself near an ally to give them movement speed. You're strong throughout and you peak really powerful. So I think the Oath of Glory is definitely one of those slept on subclasses, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you want to show support to the channel as well as get some awesome benefits along the way, consider joining our Patreon. But with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an amazing day, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then.